The night was drowned in silence until a gunshot tore through the Grand Marino mansion, echoing like thunder across marble halls. Vincenzo Marino, feared kingpin, staggered, clutching his chest as crimson stained his silk shirt. His hand trembled as he reached for the phone, every breath shallow, every second stolen from death's grip. He whispered to himself, "It can't end this way." The glow of chandeliers flickered above him, shadows stretching across the lifeless grandeur. Adrian Cole entered the hall moments too late, eyes widening at the sight of the fallen king. The scent of gunpowder burned the air as blood crept across the polished floor. Adrian whispered, "Who did this?" But silence answered. Vincenzo's phone screen glowed faintly, a final text appearing. "It's done. The king is dead." Adrian's pulse raced, rage and grief colliding, his mind swarming with betrayal. He knew this was no random strike. It was a message carved in blood. The empire had cracked, and the war had only just begun. The air was heavy with whispers of betrayal as guards rushed through the mansion's halls, their faces pale with fear. Adrian moved among them, but his silence screamed louder than their panic. He pressed a bloodied hand against the wall, each breath reminding him that trust had shattered with one bullet. A guard stammered. It was an inside job, but Adrian's glare silenced him instantly. The storm outside beat against the glass like an omen, lightning searing shadows across gilded portraits of men who once ruled unchallenged. Adrian thought, loyalty is ash, and ash burns fast. Every creak of the floorboards, every trembling whisper, felt like a dagger pointed at his back. His mind replayed Vincenzo's final gasps, and with them came a truth he could not ignore. Someone within had orchestrated the fall. The syndicate wasn't at war with rivals. It was at war with itself. Adrian slipped into the study, the only sanctuary left in the chaos. The room smelled of old cigars and polished wood, a place where deals were made and lives were broken. He leaned against the desk, his fingers brushing carved initials that once symbolized loyalty. Vincenzo trusted everyone, and it killed him, Adrian muttered bitterly. Memories clawed at him, nights of laughter, bloody feasts of victory, whispered promises of loyalty that had now turned to poison. A storm lamp flickered, casting jagged shadows that danced like ghosts across the room. Adrian whispered, "Was I blind, or just desperate to believe?" The silence mocked him. His reflection in the glass cabinet seemed foreign, a man carved from anger and guilt. Adrian knew the answer lingered within these walls, hidden in shadows where betrayal bred like rot. The mansion's great hall filled with whispers, every voice sharpened by paranoia. Adrian stood at the center, his presence a storm within a storm. One man dared to speak, "The betrayer hides among us," and silence followed like a blade. Adrian's eyes scanned the room, catching every twitch, every drop of sweat glistening under the chandeliers. He growled, "If loyalty means nothing, then fear will keep you alive tonight." Thunder roared, rattling the walls, and the air felt suffocating. Adrian's heart pounded with the weight of suspicion, each face a mask hiding secrets. He knew trust was dead, and from its corpse rose something darker, paranoia. The syndicate had always thrived on fear, but tonight, fear turned inward. The family was unraveling, and Adrian would tear apart the shadows until truth screamed. Adrian walked into Vincenzo's private chamber, a place layered with secrecy. On the desk lay a small coded note, words scribbled in haste, half stained with blood. He picked it up, frowning as he whispered, "This wasn't just betrayal, it was planned." The words hinted at a larger conspiracy, one that stretched far beyond the mansion walls. Adrian felt the chill of realization crawl up his spine. This wasn't about revenge, it was about dismantling everything Vincenzo built. He closed his fist around the note, veins straining as lightning flashed across his face. The storm outside felt like a mirror of the storm within. Someone wanted a legacy destroyed. Adrian muttered, his voice cold as steel. The war wasn't coming, it had already begun. Adrian walked the rain-slicked streets of memory, haunted by nights when loyalty still had meaning. Years ago, He was a soldier with bloodied fists and a hungry heart, eager to rise in the Marino family. He remembered Vincenzo's approving nod, a silent acknowledgement that Adrian was becoming more than a pawn. But the warmth of acceptance had always been laced with violence. He recalled his first kill, a rival dealer begging for mercy in an alley painted with neon and blood. Adrian whispered then, "Family above all," believing every word. Now the phrase tasted like poison. The ghosts of those nights pressed against his conscience, reminding him that loyalty had never been free. He had traded pieces of his soul for a seat at a table that now lay broken. Lightning flared, and Adrian muttered, "The past is never buried. It waits for its chance to claw back." The meeting room reeked of power and smoke, walls lined with maps of territories soaked in blood. Vincenzo once sat at the head of the long oak table, his presence overwhelming, his voice absolute. Adrian remembered the first time he stood before the kingpin, heart pounding, sweat dampening his collar. Vincenzo said, "Loyalty buys you life, betrayal buys you death," words etched like scars on Adrian's soul. Every man around that table bowed, but Adrian saw fear in their eyes, not devotion. The kingpin had built an empire where silence was currency and death, the only punishment. Even now, in memory, Adrian could feel Vincenzo's gaze, piercing, testing, as though he had always suspected the seeds of treachery that would one day grow. Adrian muttered in the present, "You ruled like a god, but gods bleed too." The memory of his siblings struck deeper than any blade. Elena Cole, sharp-eyed and quick-tongued, had always been his closest confidant. She laughed when others trembled, her charm a mask for ambitions Adrian never questioned. "We rise together or we fall together," she once told him, a promise that felt eternal. But even then, shadows lurked in her gaze, hints of a hunger Adrian mistook for courage. He recalled nights when Elena whispered strategies, her words sharper than knives, guiding him through blood and betrayal. The storm outside mirrored the storm in his chest as he whispered, "Was your love ever real, or was I just another pawn?" The thought carved wounds deeper than betrayal itself. If she was the traitor, then family was nothing but a curse passed down through blood. The enforcer's presence was felt before he entered the room. Marcus Kane, a silent executioner, had eyes like cold steel and hands built for breaking men. Adrian watched as Marcus moved with calm precision, every gesture radiating violence restrained. "Orders keep me breathing," Marcus once muttered after snapping a rival's neck without a second thought. Tonight, his expression carried doubt, faint but dangerous. Adrian studied him, knowing that if the enforcer's loyalty cracked, the entire empire would collapse faster than bullets could fly. Marcus stood near the window, rain tracing lines down the glass, his reflection caught between loyalty and regret. Adrian whispered, "Even weapons tire of killing." The silence was an answer. In a world where betrayals spread like wildfire, even the sharpest blade could turn inward. Adrian's distrust grew when a familiar face emerged from the shadows. Lucas Romero, once a rival, now walking with careful steps. His eyes were sharp, his smirk faint, like a man who had survived too many storms. Lucas said, "You need me more than you want me," words laced with both arrogance and truth. Adrian's jaw clenched, memories of battles fought against him resurfacing. Yet, in that tension was the undeniable reality: they now shared a common enemy. Lucas leaned against the table, his posture relaxed, but his tone serious. "If the betrayer tears down the empire, we'll all be dust." Adrian's fists curled, torn between striking him or trusting him. The storm rattled the mansion windows, a warning that alliances built tonight would determine whether tomorrow brought survival or annihilation. The ledger lay open beneath the flickering lamplight, its pages heavy with secrets. Adrian traced his blood-stained finger across coded numbers and hidden accounts, every symbol a revelation of betrayal. "They've been bleeding us from within," he whispered, voice tight with rage. The storm outside hammered against the window, but inside the silence pressed heavier. He imagined Vincenzo's voice reminding him, "Trust is currency, and ours has been stolen." Every line of ink screamed conspiracy, roots marked across continents, alliances buried in shadows. Adrian's jaw tightened, his breath uneven, realizing the Empire had rotted long before the bullet ended Vincenzo. The betrayer has been here all along, he muttered, eyes narrowing as truth carved scars across his soul. The room felt smaller, darker, as if the walls themselves were closing in with the weight of treachery. Gunfire cracked the night as rival families clashed in the streets. Adrian dove for cover, bullets tearing through the walls, each shot echoing the chaos that betrayal had unleashed. Flames licked the sky as cars exploded, the stench of gasoline choking the air. He growled, "This isn't a war, it's a slaughter." Around him men screamed, their loyalty reduced to ash. The once unshakable syndicate now crumbled, fighting enemies who sensed weakness. Adrian's pulse thundered, his revolver heavy in his hand, his knuckles white with desperation. The blood on the pavement seemed endless, painting the streets in crimson truths. He realized with grim clarity that the fall of Vincenzo had opened the gates to hell. There was no turning back. The city itself had become the battlefield. Elena's smile was sharp as glass, her eyes gleaming with secrets she refused to share. Adrian remembered the way she laughed amidst the gunfire, her charm masking the shadows in her soul. "Trust me," she had always said, but now those words felt like poison. She leaned close, her whisper like a blade. "Every king falls when family sharpens the knife." Adrian's blood chilled, his hands trembling not from fear but rage. He stared at her, searching for the sister he once knew, but all he saw was a stranger clothed in betrayal. In her silence he found his answer. She was not just complicit, she was a player in the game. His heart fractured, torn between love and fury, as the storm within him grew louder than the chaos outside. The victim's cries echoed through Adrian's mind as he entered the dimly lit chamber. Sofia Marino, innocent and untouched by the blood-stained empire, sat bound to a chair, eyes wide with terror. Her tears cut lines down her pale face, and her voice broke as she whispered, "Why are they doing this?" Adrian's chest ached, his anger shifting from cold vengeance to protective fury. He muttered, "Because innocence is a weapon to monsters." In her suffering, he saw the price of betrayal. Family turned into pawns, hope strangled for power. Her presence reminded him of everything worth saving, but also everything already lost. The empire fed on the weak, and Sofia had become its cruelest bargaining chip. Adrian swore silently that her pain would not be wasted, that her fear would become his reason to burn the empire to the ground. The ambush came without warning. Shadows erupted with muzzle flashes as masked gunmen surrounded Adrian, their bullets slicing through the night air. He rolled behind a stone pillar, his gun barking in return, sparks exploding against the marble walls. Blood sprayed across the ground as allies fell, their screams drowned by relentless fire. Adrian's chest heaved, fury and grief crashing in waves. "You think you can bury me tonight?" he roared into the darkness, firing until his revolver clicked empty. Silence followed, broken only by the dripping of rain through shattered glass above. Smoke coiled through the air, bodies sprawled lifeless across the chamber floor. Adrian stood, blood on his cheek, heart heavy with loss. The questions remained unanswered, and the shadows whispered only one truth: this war had only begun. Adrian sat in the dimly lit chapel of the mansion, hands trembling as he pressed them together. Ghosts of his past crimes crowded the silence, whispering in his ear, reminding him of blood spilled and loyalties broken. He muttered, "How much of me is left to save?" The candle flames trembled like fragile souls, casting long shadows across his weary face. Memories of every man he had killed replayed, not as victories, but as burdens chained to his chest. He clenched his jaw, fighting the surge of guilt that rose like bile. "Justice or revenge?" he whispered. "What am I really chasing?" The storm outside roared in answer, as if mocking his turmoil. In the silence, Adrian realized the enemy he feared most wasn't out there, it was within. The war for his soul had begun long before bullets tore through the halls. Marcus Kane stood in the rain-soaked courtyard, his stoic mask cracking for the first time. His eyes followed the water pooling at his feet, as though every drop carried the weight of blood he had spilled. He remembered the faces, the screams, the silence that always followed his hand. "I was built to kill," he muttered, "but what is left when the killing ends?" His reflection in the puddle twisted, fractured by ripples, showing a man he no longer recognized. Adrian approached silently, watching the cracks form in the enforcer's armor. He realized Marcus was no longer just a weapon. He was a man shackled to his own sins. In that moment, the silent executioner revealed his humanity, and the world felt both weaker and heavier for it. Lucas Romero leaned across the battered wooden table, sliding papers toward Adrian with a smirk that masked desperation. "This is what I know," he said, his tone edged with warning. Adrian scanned the documents, supply chains, contacts, hidden accounts, each one a key to unraveling the Empire's lies. Lucas added, "Truth has a price, and I'm not cheap." Adrian's glare was ice, but he knew Lucas spoke from experience. Betrayal had nearly destroyed them both, and survival had carved them into men who trusted no one. Adrian muttered, "You'll get what's owed, but only if we survive long enough to spend it." Their uneasy alliance was sealed not by loyalty, but by necessity, a fragile thread woven in a world where every thread was soaked in blood. Elena's voice cut through the air like a blade, each word dripping with venom. "You think loyalty means something? It's nothing but chains." Adrian's fists clenched as he stared at the sister he once trusted more than anyone. The storm illuminated her face, shadows carving her features into something cruel and unfamiliar. She stepped closer, her smirk daring him to deny the truth. "You followed Vincenzo like a dog," she whispered. "And where did it leave you?" Adrian's chest burned with fury, but his heart cracked with grief. "We were supposed to rise together," he muttered. Elena's silence was the loudest betrayal, her gaze a confession without words. In that moment, Adrian understood that the war was not just for power, it was for the soul of the family itself. The raid came like thunder, shaking the mansion to its foundations. Armed men stormed the halls, their boots pounding as gunfire erupted in every direction. Adrian fired back, his rage carrying him through the chaos. Glass shattered, walls splintered, chandeliers crashed down in a storm of fire and steel. Marcus roared as he tore through attackers, his doubts buried beneath survival's demand. Lucas shouted orders, his voice lost in the storm of bullets. Elena vanished into the smoke, her betrayal hidden behind the chaos she unleashed. Adrian's lungs burned as he dove for cover, his mind searing with one truth: the Empire wasn't falling from outside attacks, it was crumbling from the rot within. The raid was not just a battle, it was a revelation written in blood. The truth carved through Adrian like a blade when Elena's betrayal finally came into the open. Her words struck harder than bullets. "I've been pulling the strings, brother," she confessed, her tone cold, her smirk cruel. Adrian's chest tightened, rage and grief, boiling as memories of childhood trust collided with the present. He whispered, "All this time you were the shadow that poisoned us." Elena stepped closer, her eyes glittering with venom. "Family is a lie, Adrian. Power is the only truth." His fists trembled, his heart breaking not from betrayal of blood, but from the realization that love had been nothing more than a mask. The room spun with rage, thunder echoing like a war drum. In that moment, Adrian swore he would never forgive, but the weight of their bond twisted the knife deeper than any enemy ever could. Adrian staggered back, his voice breaking with fury as he confronted the truth. "You destroyed everything," he growled, his words heavy with grief. Elena's expression remained unshaken, her smirk carved from steel. "No, brother," she said coldly. "I freed us from a rotten throne." Adrian's chest heaved as he remembered every sacrifice made for the Syndicate, every drop of blood spilled in its name. His heart burned with betrayal, his mind screaming for vengeance. The storm outside howled like wolves, the mansion walls trembling as though echoing their conflict. For the first time, Adrian saw Elena not as his sister, but as the betrayer who had dismantled their world. His hand reached for his gun, yet his soul ached at the thought of raising it against blood. The walls of the empire began to crumble as whispers spread of Elena's treachery. Rivals smelled blood in the air, their attacks growing bolder by the hour. Adrian stood among shattered ledgers and burnt maps, realizing the foundation was gone. He muttered, "The empire was built on fear, but it dies on betrayal." Vincenzo's legacy had been reduced to dust, and the family that once ruled like kings now tore itself apart. Marcus entered, his expression grim, his silence heavier than words. Lucas slammed his fist on the table, shouting, "The world is already carving us into pieces." Adrian closed his eyes, knowing they weren't losing a war. They were living through the death of an empire. Sophia's cries haunted Adrian as he watched her suffering become a weapon in this war. She lay weak in a darkened chamber, bruised but unbroken, her eyes pleading silently. "Why must the innocent pay?" Adrian whispered, his hand brushing hers gently. Her presence reminded him of everything human, everything worth saving. Yet her pain ignited a fury he could not contain. Marcus stood in the doorway, his jaw tense, while Lucas muttered, "This is what betrayal costs us." Adrian clenched his fists, his heart breaking. "I'll burn their world for this," he swore. Sophia's suffering was no longer just tragedy. It was the spark that turned his grief into unstoppable vengeance. The enforcer's shadow loomed large in the courtyard, rain streaking across his face as Marcus stepped forward. He had been the syndicate's blade, its silent executioner. But tonight his path collided with Adrian's. Marcus growled, "Only one of us walks away." Adrian raised his gun, their eyes locking, both men bound by duty and regret. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the duel of loyalty against survival. Each step echoed like thunder, the weight of every body Marcus had left behind pressing against them both. Adrian's heart pounded, rage and sorrow colliding. He whispered, "I won't let you stand in my way." The storm bore witness as two weapons of the empire clashed, not for honor, but for the soul of what remained. The truth uncoiled like a serpent when Adrian stood in the abandoned estate, files scattered across the marble table. The whispers of betrayal pointed not just to Alina but to someone far greater. His hands trembled as he read names of men who moved governments, cartels, and banks. The syndicate had never been the crown. It was merely a pawn. Adrian whispered, "We were pieces in a game I never saw." His rage burned, not just at betrayal, but at realizing their family had been controlled by faceless kings. Thunder cracked, the storm outside beating against the glass like drums of war. He muttered, "The betrayer was never alone, there was always a hand guiding the knife." The revelation tightened around his chest, a suffocating weight heavier than bullets. Adrian sank into the chair, realization clawing at his mind. "All this time I wasn't hunting enemies," he whispered. "I was dancing for them." The shadows felt heavier, the silence deafening. He imagined Vincenzo's voice, reminding him that betrayal always comes from within. But now he saw the deeper truth. He had been nothing more than a pawn in a global empire of shadows. Rage rippled through him as he clenched his fists, veins taut, jaw trembling. Lucas leaned against the wall, smirking grimly. "You finally see it, don't you? We're nothing but pieces on their board." Adrian's heart thundered, his breath sharp and uneven. He muttered, "Then it's time to turn their board upside down." The room felt like the eye of a storm before a greater war erupted. The scale of the conspiracy unfolded with chilling clarity. Documents revealed ties between politicians, arms dealers, and shadow corporations. Adrian traced routes across a map, stretching from Europe to South America, every line a vein of corruption. His stomach churned as he whispered, "This isn't a syndicate. It's an empire with no borders." The storm outside roared louder, as though the heavens themselves recoiled at the truth. Lucas muttered, "They've owned us from the beginning." Marcus entered, his face grim, silence speaking louder than words. Adrian's eyes narrowed, fire igniting inside his chest. "If they think I'll die as their pawn, they're wrong," he growled. The realization didn't break him. It rebuilt him into something harder, sharper, deadlier. Lucas poured a drink, his voice calm but eyes sharp. You can fight them, but you'll never win alone. Adrian's jaw tightened as he watched the amber liquid swirl. I'm not asking for allies, he muttered. I'm demanding vengeance. The firelight cast jagged shadows across their faces, their uneasy bond stitched by necessity. Marcus leaned in, his voice low. Vengeance doesn't build empires, it buries them. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Adrian finally whispered, Then let the world burn if that's the price. The storm rattled the windows, lightning flashing like a blade across the room. Their alliance was fragile, built not on trust, but on shared hatred. And hatred, Adrian realized, might be the only weapon sharp enough to cut through an empire of lies. The trap was set in silence, the air charged with anticipation. Adrian stood in the shadowed hall of the estate, weapons prepared, heart pounding with the weight of vengeance. Lucas checked his pistol, muttering, This is either brilliance or suicide. Marcus adjusted his cuffs, his silence more terrifying than words. Adrian whispered, We end this tonight. No more ghosts, no more masters. The storm outside screamed against the windows as footsteps approached, the pawns of the hidden empire walking blindly into the jaws of death. Adrian's breath slowed, his eyes narrowing with unshakable resolve. Every scar, every betrayal, every loss had led to this night. He growled, The empire bleeds tonight. The storm inside him was now louder than the one outside, and there would be no turning back. The estate stood in silence before the storm of violence, its halls echoing with memories of power and betrayal. Adrian tightened his grip on the pistol, every step a march toward destiny. Lucas muttered, This is the lion's den, his smirk hiding fear. Marcus loomed behind them, silent as always, a shadow prepared to kill or die. The air carried the weight of finality, every candle flame trembling as though aware of what was to come. Adrian whispered, Tonight, ghosts are buried. His heart pounded with the rhythm of vengeance, guilt, and reluctant hope. The doors groaned open, revealing the Empire's heart, where blood and legacy would clash for the last time. The antagonist emerged from shadows, a towering figure cloaked in authority, eyes gleaming with cold certainty. You think you've won by reaching me, he said, voice like gravel, but you've only walked into my design. Adrian raised his pistol, fury burning in his gaze, but doubt weighed heavy. Lucas sneered, Kings fall like anyone else. Marcus stepped forward, fists clenched, silent as thunder. The hall trembled with tension, lightning illuminating the face of a man who had ruled through fear. Adrian whispered, Your empire ends tonight, though deep inside he feared the cost of delivering that end. The room erupted in violence. Bullets tore through chandeliers, glass shattered, and the estate shook with screams of war. Adrian and Lucas fired into the darkness, their targets faceless but relentless. Marcus fought barehanded, his fists cracking bones like thunder. The antagonist moved like a serpent, each strike calculated, his cruelty precise. Adrian's lungs burned, rage clawing for release. You bled us dry, and for what? He shouted as gunfire lit his face. The Empire's last defenders fell one by one, but Adrian felt no victory, only the crushing weight of survival. The hall became a graveyard for loyalty, trust, and bloodlines. The storm narrowed to a single moment, Adrian and the antagonist locked in a brutal standoff. The world fell silent, as if holding its breath. The kingpin sneered, Kill me and you become me. Adrian's gun wavered, sweat dripping, heart shattering under the weight of choice. Lucas urged, Do it, while Marcus remained silent, his eyes a mirror of regret. Adrian whispered, I won't be your shadow, lowering his pistol. But then he raised it again, fire flashing in his eyes. The silence shattered with one shot, a thunderclap that ended a legacy. The kingpin fell, his empire bleeding out with him. Adrian stood trembling, torn between triumph and ruin. The estate smoldered in silence, its walls broken, its legacy buried in ash. Adrian walked away from the ruins, rain soaking his bloodied face, eyes hollow with loss. Lucas disappeared into the night without a word, leaving only shadows behind. Marcus lingered, then turned, his silence eternal. Adrian's steps echoed, each one heavy with ghosts he could never silence. He whispered, "Justice or vengeance? It doesn't matter anymore." In the distance, a phone rang, faint but insistent, promising another war. Adrian didn't look back, his silhouette fading into darkness as the storm finally broke. The empire was gone, but the scars remained, carved forever into his soul.